one of the most advanced IDP legal frameworks in the whole entire world. Yet in 2004, the Constitutional Court found there to be such grave breaches in violations of both national and international laws protecting IDPs that they called a state of unconstitutionality. And to this day, despite some actions by the government, that state has remained in practice. So why is that, you may ask? Well, one reason is because IDPs continue to have their most basic rights violated. For example, their right to food, to shelter, to education are constantly violated. Some examples from my own experience. In El Chaco, I was visiting IDP homes. These homes were basically made of tin or plastic. Some didn't have any proper roofs. Most of them were they had no toilets, no running water. I went to visit one woman that really sticks in my mind. This woman was 6 months pregnant, and she was standing in this house with water up to her legs. And there she was with her other young children. Her house was completely flooded. The water was the same water where the toilet went into, and that was the kind of conditions that she was in. And she was a registered IDP, let alone what happens to the non-registered. Other examples of, for example, in Tumaco, women who, and that's a thing, the women there are much more IDP women than men, and also a large percentage of women who are single mothers and have lost their husbands and thus are caring for their children. And so, for example, this one household, a woman with 6 children, and she hadn't received any food from the government, had no way to work, and was struggling to even provide maybe 1 meal a day for her 6 children, let alone for herself. So why else? Well, the prevention programs are inadequate and are clearly failing. You only have to look last year. In the first 6 months of the year, there was 270,000 people displaced just in 6 months. That's the highest amount in that time frame in the past decades. Also, the protection of IDP leaders, the people that try and protect IDPs, is completely inadequate. Only last week, Ana Isabel Gomez Perez, a leader of the movement working to return lands illegally usurped in Cordoba, was gunned down as she was beside her 16-year-old daughter. IDPs continue to also face many obstacles to access the land that was illegally taken from them, and there remains 5.5 million hectares of land that has been illegally usurped and remains in the hands of third parties or still in the illegally armed actors. So the question, I suppose, is what does the US have to do with this? Well, as Ben said very clearly, as one of the most, as the highest donor to Colombia, the US has a huge ability to influence politics in Colombia. So, I mean, some areas where they can affect positive change, for example, or at least can do less negative. The FTA. When I was working in Colombia, one of the issues I was working on was palm oil. Palm oil has been shown to cause displacement throughout the country, both forced displacement at the point of a gun, but also displacement just because people simply do not have any more food to eat because there's no room for them to grow their own crops. So there has been displacement throughout the country, yet with the FTA as it is at the moment, the industries, agricultural mega projects such as palm oil will be favoured, and thus will exacerbate the already huge problem of displacement in Colombia. Fumigations. Travelled throughout Nariño and have seen indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities who are forced to displace because their land had been fumigated numerous times. They're left with absolutely zero food to eat from, and their water is contaminated, and people have health problems because of the fumigations. And yet, to make things even worse, when these people do displace, they arrive in the big cities, they go to register to get help that they're obviously a key way in which the government should change policies. Another way is that 60% of aid continues to go to the Colombian military, yet we have seen time and time again where the military does not obey international humanitarian law. For example, I was working at a Charco where there was over 8,000 people displaced in one single mass displacement, and that was because of the Colombian government, the Colombian army not respecting international humanitarian law. So that is a way in which the US has to exert more pressure